Hour number 2. And he does exist. He actually does exist. Bart Keeler coming in, because we got a lot of stuff to talk about on the national team front. And I do have some reffing down here. Last time you were with us, what's the mug, by the way?
It's a nondescript Vera Bradley mug from work.
A nondescript Vera Bradley mug. Okay, because the boss does have Vera Bradley handbags and luggage. So I know.
Next time we have an event that I can buy stuff, I'll snag one or two for you.
Attaboy. Apparently, Charlotte is finalizing a deal to sign Tim Ream from Fulham. The deal's been close, and now Ream is traveling to Charlotte to complete the move.
That's a good deal for Tim Ream. Still play at a pretty high-ish level, come home literally and figuratively.
Yes.
And I think we've all wanted to move on from Tim Ream at the national team. Not anything against Tim Ream. He's been good, but as someone who had to run a lot this weekend and whose knees are now very sore on a Monday morning, I understand that he probably feels the same after playing one game of really high-level competitive soccer.
Wow.
Just a hunch there, John. No offense to Tim Ream. You get to 35 and things hurt a lot more frequently.
Don't make me laugh. I've got to go. I got to go to my ENT because it's that time of year.
Oh Lord. Yeah. Well, I feel John, going from hot in Las Vegas with no humidity to hot in Atlanta with tons of humidity. The sinuses were sinusing last weekend. That's for sure.
Oh, brother.
Yeah.
I mean, all right. So I know that we've got to talk about the men's national team, the women's national team. I wanted to get into the end of the U20 match with you and the U20 tournament and some reffing down here that's attached and VAR and VAR and things like that. So which one of the alphabet soups would you like to start in as a part of the discussion?
Let's get the U20 thing out of the way because I think it's easily summed up by saying it was clearly rigged for Mexico.
I'm shocked that something like that would ever be said, because now for those that don't know the situation, there were the United States on an absolute screamer by Nimfasa Berkimas.
Great goal.
Yeah, and so Crown Legacy's Nimfasa Berkimas. He scores to make it 1-0. So then we get into the second half of the match. And the United States is still winning. And yes, for full disclosure, the match and the tournament were in Mexico. So if I'm remembering the situation correctly, the fancy LED board held up by the fourth official had that many minutes attached, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that was the number, 5. That was the number that was on the light board. For some strange reason, and you can start your black helicopters and get them, circled out of the bullpen as you wish. The match continued past that particular number and kept going and kept going. And then I want to say in the 97th minute, you end up with an equalizer by Mexico, which then sends it into an extra 30.
Yep.
Which then in the 121st minute, Mexico gets the eventual game winner. They win 2-1 that match. They win the tournament, and they are your CONCACAF U20 champions. Whoop, whoop, raise the roof, raise the roof. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I think two things can be true at the same time here, John. One, the U.S. did try to kill time and waste time during stoppage time. As every opponent that U.S. has ever played in any sort of CONCACAF tournament ever been done to us before. Mm-hmm. However, it seems like we are the only team that's ever been penalized by adding that additional time to this extent to the time allotted. Because 5 to 7 that's 2 minutes. That's a long time.
Yes. 2.
And then for the final whistle to blow immediately after the goal has scored. On top of some shenanigans that happened, in regular time. It's just one of those things where I think the laws of the game were applied correctly in this sense. In this instance, it just so happens that they just decided to apply them correctly to hurt the U.S. national team because poor little Mexico couldn't go without winning another youth tournament. They needed the, look, at least they made the final this time because that's better than they did at the Olympic qualification tournament. I mean, Mexico has been not very good on the youth side, and they needed this to boost their own confidence and make them feel good about themselves. Just like Australia needed to talk all that trash before swimming, only to, not beat us on gold medal and total count.
Oh boy. I mean, that's I
We
always
could be swimming down here too if we want to, John.
Yeah, hey.
I got that in the bag.
Hey, Paris down here, we can do that too. By the way, sidebar, since for Paris down here, I'm sorry, I've got locked into Gold Zone. And,
yeah.
And I'm like, well, and once you get into Andrew Siciliano and Scott Hansen, who host the Red Zone for the NFL channels, I'm like, all right, those are the guys that you needed. And that's the balance that you have. First, full disclosure, I would love to have that kind of a gig, to do a Red Zone kind of a hosting thing, because I always enjoy that kind of energy. But yeah, I lock it on Gold Zone and I walk away. I don't have to change the channel, especially with the 6-hour time change. I'm good to go. I dig it. But we're not going to, unless you want to divulge what happened in the gymnastics competition early this morning in Paris.
Haven't gotten there yet. I know I saw Twitter's, but haven't watched it yet.
Yes. So, and you can sit there and look at Twitter's and know what's going on, or you can watch Gold Zone and know what's going on, or you can just sit there and plug your fingers in your ear and go tingle-lingaloo. So you look at what happened in the U20s, and how would you gauge where the United States is in their U20 development right now, and then obviously with Mexico winning the tournament, is it a bit of a false sense of security for Mexico, considering how their senior team is right now? How would you gauge where the United States and Mexico are in their U20s?
Well, I think overall, you just have to remember that youth tournaments are a snapshot of one age group, right? And I think Barkemus is 17, if my memory and numbers are correct. So he kind of is a little bit, younger than the quote age group you would normally expect in this tournament specifically. Obviously, because you have
he's playing up.
He is playing up. But I think when you look at you, and we'll talk about this when we get to the Olympics. When you look at youth tournaments, the actual winner very rarely means anything. And not to discredit Mexico winning the tournament, right? The U.S. has won multiple of these in a row, and it's nice to win. But the grand scheme of things, it just means that you have a deep enough pool that you are able to put out a team at this age group that is probably not your first choice of the available, under 20 players, and make it to a tournament final, even in CONCACAF. That says that you have some good young talent. That does not yield senior national team success, as the U.S. men's national team can attest to, as the Mexican national team can attest to. They, Quinto Partido is still a thing, and they won the gold back in 2012 at the Olympics. So, I mean, whether it actually means something or not, it is, most people would say it doesn't really mean anything to win. It just is a good example and a good display that you have youth talent at that age group. Now, again, Mexico didn't even make the final 2 years ago, so maybe this particular age group for Mexico is decent. These, what is this, 2004 to 2007 ish, right? Maybe those age groups are fine for this Mexico generation. What does it look like after that? Clearly, nothing before that was super great. So, you can be happy you won. I think it is indicates that this particular age group might be okay.
So you look at, the senior national team for Mexico still has some serious issues. And the larger point for me is, okay, so if the senior national team has the issues that it has, and you perpetually seem to not want to pull the trigger and bring in that younger talent to help bridge the gap and get you into that next stage. I don't know literally what the future for Mexico is until you start to remember, hey, you've got these young dudes, you need to integrate them, because we've seen it with other national teams and other, the women's national team of the United States is another example. You hang on to something too long, then you get exposed. We've seen that with the Mexican senior national team on the men's side.
Well, and that was absolutely the problem that Mexico had during the last qualification cycle. Now, you could also argue that the guys behind them weren't ready for that stage. And that's kind of the catch-22 of how do you actually, not even a catch-22. It's just the conundrum of at what point do you bring in young players who haven't proven themselves to prove themselves?
Right.
Because that is a risk versus keeping the guys who helps time and time again. That is also a risk. So it is risk assessment. And if you're Mexico at this point, I think it's pretty clear to me that you need to start looking at what other talent you have than what you have been putting out on the men's senior national team side, because really the only thing Mexico can claim are some Gold Cup wins that were with the U.S. not fielding a senior, an A team, and even to some extent Canada not, fielding their best senior team. So I think it's still true that maybe Mexico has a wider player pool than maybe the U.S. and Canada, because I think their level, their floor is probably still higher than a lot of the Mexican and Canadian, a lot of the U.S. and Canadian internationals, but their top level talent has yet to prove to be very good. And I don't think this particular U20s tournament did anything to change that. It just, maybe raises their floor a little bit.
So since we're talking senior men's national team, let's get into the United States. News kind of trickled out that we can add Pellegrino Matarazzo to the list of folks when that bolo came out. Build, I think, was one of the element of the entities that had Matarazzo part of the discussion. When I mentioned Pellegrino Matarazzo, what sticks in your head?
I mean, I think it shows to me the level of candidate that U.S. Soccer is looking for. I do want to say that I am personally a little cautious because he doesn't have international playing or management experience. And for me, that is something I would like for a coach to have, because we don't need a coach learning what the international game is on the fly. We have 2 years to get this right, and that is quickly eroding. So when it comes specifically to Matarazzo, that would be a concern I have. Now, the positive is he clearly has U.S. connections, which is probably something U.S. Soccer would prefer. But I think it does show that they are looking at managers who have been successful at, the club level, coaches who have experience as managers. I think he is just the type of candidate that says, okay, if this is the type of guy we're looking for and we're looking at, it means that U.S. Soccer isn't just going to hire the guy who's, out back who happens to be available, aka Steve Cherundolo.
Yes.
No offense to Steve, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I do. Yes, and I know that a lot of folks are kind of smiling and gritting their teeth when you mention Steve Cherundolo as a name that's discussed. I know that a lot of folks in the Western Conference of Major League Soccer are like, yeah, go for it. Yeah. And the rest of humanity might be going, yeah, Steve Cherundolo. All right, so let's get into Paris. And Paris down here, let's start with the team that's no longer playing, the men's national team, and got out of group, and then ran into the proverbial buzzsaw with their first match out of group. When you look at things, holistically, I guess from 30,000 feet, with what we saw from the men's national team in Paris, what do you think?
So I thought there was first off, I wanted to discuss the discourse online.
He starts with a heavy sigh. He's going someplace.
I want to discuss the discourse. I think if you're just looking at score lines, you're not really understanding soccer very well. mainly because Morocco got 2 penalties.
Yeah.
Legit one that was like,
Woo!
I don't know why that second penalty, was given for the fourth goal. That was really harsh.
Yeah.
I do think it's indicative that when you put Philly guys out on the field in a knockout round situation, they're going to fold. But that just is what that's the players we have. Poor Nate Harriel. But I think there's a lot of like gnashing of teeth and like, wow, we suck, when it's again a youth national team tournament. These are nowhere close to our preferred best U23 players, and part of that is because our best U23 players are playing regularly for the US men's national team, to the point where they were integral parts of our Copa America run that, yes, ended early. But I think we all understand that a club that doesn't have to release a player for the Olympics is probably going to give that player a choice and say, well, you can either play in Copa America or you can play in the Olympics. And the reality is most of those players are going to choose the Copa America tournament because it is a more meaningful tournament than a youth Olympics tournament, so that is the biggest thing. Who didn't have that problem this summer, John? Morocco.
Yes.
And when you look at what the team, like, first off, yes, we lost to Morocco and France 7-0. That sucks, right? I think you can obviously say that that is a negative on the whole. But when you look at the team that we brought versus the team that both of those countries brought, the talent gap is just there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not because our players suck. It's because, again, I mean, I don't know. Ashraf Hakimi is really darn good, John.
Yes. Last
And
time I checked, yes.
and our overage players, no offense to them, are 3 MLS guys. I mean, that's just the reality, right? I mean, Georgi Mihailovic, Walker Zimmerman, Miles Robinson, we love them. They're, good dudes, but they're not they're not Hakimi level players. They're just not. They're not even close to that, on top of, a lot of other of their U23 players who have been playing, not just on teams, but playing at for teams in the top 5 leagues. Our, I don't know, best player, maybe, if you're going to go Badge FC kind of stuff, is,
Sure.
Paredes and Aronson, mainly Paredes at Wolfsburg. We have a lot of other guys who are playing at decent clubs. But it just, the reality is your talent gap was exposed. And that's what happens. And again, when your over 23 player is one of the best players at his position in the world and has been for, I don't know, a decade, maybe.
And plays at PSG, yeah.
Not a decade, half a decade, but you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah. He has a track record.
Like, what did you expect to happen? And I think that's where the discourse of trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater over a youth national team tournament, where we still advanced the knockout rounds, which is the first time we've done that since 2000. If you don't see that as a step forward, then I don't know what to tell you. Now, I think you can also say, well, we've proven we can do it, so the next time it is win that knockout round game. But this team was not going to beat Morocco. You look at these players that you selected, not better than the players Morocco had.
You look at the women's national team, and word out of Paris. Every women's national team player is available for training today, including Tierna Davidson, Emily Fox, and Corbin Albert. No confirmation yet about Davidson returning to the roster, but everyone's out there right now. Emma Hayes, quote, "It's a great sign," end quote. So that's where the U.S. women's team is, and they just seem to, they're handling their business, as they say, right now.
Oh, John, hold on.
What?
We got some breaking news here.
Hang on. Now I'll go ahead and give it to you.
It's U.S. women's national team related.
Okay, hang on. If it's what I think it is, then let me get you your music. All right, hit me.
All right. So the U.S. women's national team announced a third window in the October international window, or third
Yep.
game in the window. USA versus Argentina, October 30th at Lynn Family Stadium in Louisville. John, they're finally playing there. That's awesome. That's really cool. So love to see that we're playing at Lynn Family Stadium that has deserved a big match like this for quite some time. I would imagine that open end zone is going to get some temporary seating to fill the demand for tickets for this game.
TNT, Universo, True TV, Max, and Peacock. And they have a presenting sponsor, by the way, Jim Beam.
Which that I think that's the headliner right there, right? I mean, come on, you get Jim Beam to be a presenting partner of the U.S. Women's National Team.
For a match in Kentucky, you get that bourbon going. I mean, see now here's something for you. So you're playing at Lynn Family Stadium, October the 30th, 7:00 kick. Do you get the bourbon? Do you get the bourbon colored kit? Do you go bourbon colored bomb pop for the match at Lynn Family?
I don't think that's no.
Oh, man can dream. But October 30th at Lynn Family. So they're about blanking time that you're playing a match at Lynn Family Stadium.
Which is really cool, and that's the type of friendly that you put in that stadium, to be quite honest. I've been wanting youth national team friendlies at stadiums like that for a long time, but good for them. Love it. Yeah, that's good. I think that is a good usage of the October window. Obviously, you remember, John, FIFA took away that September international window on the women's side, not for the men's side.
Yeah.
Which for the first time I actually liked this, that the FIFA did something different for the men.
Yes.
But you added a third one, and I am hoping we get a second European match in November soon.
Mm-hmm.
My sources have been quiet on that, but hopefully soon. Anyway.
Okay. What have you seen from the women's national team? Obviously, having to navigate injuries and having to work on substitution patterns because of that. But what have you seen from Emma Hayes so far in the tournament in Paris?
So I want to just say that you are allowed to both criticize Emma Hayes for her lack of substitutions. I don't know if it's fair to criticize her for a lack of squad rotation, mainly because Sam Coffey should have just not picked up a 4th-minute yellow card. I mean, look, that is on the player to also understand that. But I think it's fair to criticize Emma for not substituting players quicker. She didn't do that in the Australia match. She didn't do it in this match against Japan. I think it's also fair to understand that her goal, and I'm okay with it in the long run, her goal is not necessarily to win gold at the Paris Games. This is the first step in the rebuilding of this program to be the juggernaut that it used to be. Now, the fact that we're still in the semifinals, we're playing for a medal tomorrow, while kind of instilling a new system, not really rotating or substituting players, because Emma's goal is to get the starting 11 to fully understand this system and get reps playing together. The fact that we're still advancing to the semifinals is pretty good. And the fact that, we still have a chance to medal and possibly get gold says a lot. But I think it's also fair to understand that this is Emma's first international tournament that she's managed, right? She's managed Champions Leagues and stuff like that, but this is a different beast entirely. The Olympics specifically are a very special and different beast because of all the things that make this a much harder tournament to win because of roster and match compression. But I think it's okay to say, hey, Emma, have you considered maybe substituting before the 90th minute?
That's very Berhalterian of her.
Yeah. And I think, again, the difference between the two is one seems to have a vision of what, the long-term vision of let's win 2027. The other one just doesn't know what he's doing. But hey, he made that MLS Cup final that one time, so that gives him enough clout to be hired and loved. So I think, again, it's fair to say, you should sub. I think it's also fair to understand, as you've reported, as you relayed the report,
Yeah.
if you get Davidson back, if you get Fox healthy, if Coffee and Albert are available for selection in this game, right? That inherently helps with squad rotation a little bit, right? You can put Tierna hopefully back in with Germa, a partnership that's been very tournament. If you can play Coffee, which I don't see why you can't. She doesn't have an injury. She was just a misconduct sub or a misconduct cut. I think you can put her in there, and now you've got you don't have to have Albert start. That means you can bring her in later for any number of the midfielders that you want to sub off. And maybe you don't start Fox. Maybe you actually start Kruger, who can play that stay back, right back job, right? And then bring Fox on later. Maybe that's a potential opportunity here. Kruger, I think, is up to that task, especially if you need someone to be essentially a third center back. So there may be some level of just rotation built in because of players both coming back and maybe being hurt. But I think, if you're just looking at evaluating Emma's job coaching this team, this tournament, it's fair to criticize her for not making substitutions quicker and more frequently in these matches.
Okay, so you had your breaking news. So I'll go ahead and give you mine. Before you came on for your segment this morning, it was divulged and discussed from our friends at the Canadian press, and we'll get into them in a minute. Brazil has appealed FIFA's decision to suspend Marta for 2 matches after her red card in the group stage of the women's tournament. Brazil set to face Spain in a semi in Marseille tomorrow. Marta sat out the quarterfinal win over France after she got the red card in her team's group finale against Spain for a foul on Olga Carmona. FIFA's disciplinary committee later determined the foul merited a 2-match suspension. The Brazilian Soccer Federation announced late Sunday they were appealing. Quote, in a statement, "Marta has an impeccable record of respecting the rules of the sport and fair play." America giggles. Being a world reference in the sport for several generations and everything she's achieved on and off the field. Even if Brazil loses to Spain in the semis, Marta will still have a chance to play in the bronze medal match set for Friday in Lyon. A Brazilian victory will send the team to the gold medal game in Paris on Saturday. Silver medals for Brazil most recently in 2008. So Brazil is appealing the 2-match suspension for Marta. No real surprise, but we now officially have that official.
As they should. I understand the laws and the rules around this tournament, making that a 2-game suspension, but I personally don't agree with it. It's not it was a foul. Let's move on. It also, look, let's be real honest. We'll play on the heartstrings a little bit. Marta deserves to play in a final match and actually have a chance to fight for a medal, fight for a gold medal. And to be frank, she's an icon of the sport. And, from just a history perspective, you wouldn't want her to have to miss out on this opportunity and not be a part of what could be something special for not just her, but her nation's team.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of special, how many times have you run out of superlatives involving Trinity Rodman?
What? You're going to have to come up with more. I think this is actually what I learned from Trinity this tournament is, I think it's fair to criticize players for maybe not performing, but she still gives 110%. I think when you look at specifically the way that the U.S. plays right now,
that's $1 in the jar, by the way. You can only give 100%.
Well, okay. She gives 100%, and then she gives 110%. Let me tell you why. She's not just playing her position as a right winger because of the way this team is playing, where you kind of have a stay home right back. She has a lot more space to cover on that right side, so she kind of is playing, taking responsibilities from either the right back or the right sided midfielder role. So she is having to put in extra effort to cover that a lot of times. And she's still able to lead this team in scoring, and she's still able to to continue to hustle and fight, and outside of one yellow card, somehow keep her temper, which is pretty impressive. But the goal she scored specifically against Japan is just. I was listening to Total Soccer Show yesterday, coming back from refereeing, and it's funny because we had this a lot in the Jill Ellis era, but it does feel a little bit more strategic and organized with Emma. But sometimes you just go, look, our best players, our really talented players, are gonna more often than not find a way to put the ball in the back of the net.
Mm-hmm.
And I think specifically Saturday morning was a good example of trust that your really darn good players will do really darn good soccer things. And Trinity showed why you should have that trust, because she tried it once or twice and it didn't come off. And then finally she got that opportunity and she saw her window. And she put it in the back of the net. I mean, it wasn't curling. That was maybe a little curl, but that was a rope into that top corner. And it also came from something that I think, when you watch the game, it was frustrating how risk averse the women's national team was playing, right? I thought it was, I don't know if this is the correct word, but it seemed like not scared, but they just didn't want to turn the ball over because, one, we know how potent Japan can be on the counterattack.
Protective?
Yeah, protective maybe is the better word. Yeah. Because you knew Japan was going to play this way and try to hit you on the counterattack. So you didn't want to give them easy opportunities to dispossess you and start a counter. But at the same time, it felt like they were a little tired, and that's where you can look at Emma and go, what are we doing here? But you need to have the confidence that you can make a dangerous pass every now and then. And I think that was the thing that you saw was Crystal Dunn said, oh, hey, here's an opportunity for me to hit a somewhat risky ball. Let me go hit it. It goes to Trinity Rodman. She takes a great touch to settle it. And there she goes into the top corner. And we're flying through the semifinals. Shockingly, the shortest of second shortest of the four semifinals. So that's the other thing is you were worried, right, of all the minutes these girls were putting on their legs, and then Germany and Canada go into not just extra time but penalty kicks. And shockingly, Jarrett, when you don't have drone footage, you don't have the data to go save penalty kicks.
It's amazing. Just couldn't see that happening. Still waiting to see. I don't expect to get an answer in the immediate future, but I'm still kind of waiting to see how big the sword of Damocles is that falls on people in Canada, and also who it falls on. Who is going to take the brunt of this punishment? Because call me cynical if you wish, I refuse to believe that the people truly responsible will get all of the blame for this, and they will try and find people to diversify said blame. I don't think, given what we know now, that Beth Priestman is going to work again in a major confederation at all. I'm still waiting to see if John Herdman survives the year in Toronto. Between accusing a New York City player, or a New York City manager, of assaulting one of his players, which was not backed up, and then Herdman didn't really chase it. I'm sorry, if a coach assaults one of my teenagers, I'm not letting it go. Between that accusation and now the fact that he was running Canada during all this, I keep waiting to see if Toronto's going to be like, you know what, maybe we should just move on.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy seeing Canada. Part of me enjoyed seeing Canada get through the group because I enjoy anything that's powered by spite, and the players were powered by spite. But then once that was done, I'm like, okay, you've done the dog and pony show. You can go home now.
I love the comment from David.
Yeah.
Somehow can't pay players, can't even host training camps, but they got all these drones. Those drones are not cheap. This is not little flying drones that you have to get that quality footage. It's impressive. Really impressive.
Yep. To the last story that we have with the Rick Westhead byline, and as we have continued to maintain, that is one of the last bylines in the state in the country of Canada that you want is a Rick Westhead byline. In the days leading up to the 23 Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, which Bart Keeler was at, Canada soccer officials worked behind the scenes to determine how to handle a complaint that had been reported to a Federation board member alleging that the women's national team program had become a toxic workplace. 3 sources familiar with the matter told TSN. After the federally funded Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner was notified and an external human relations company commissioned to investigate, Canada soccer officials subsequently decided that the probe was not being handled properly and pivot, bringing in Ottawa lawyer Erin Durant to start the process over and conduct her own investigation, the sources said. Canada Soccer has not publicly acknowledged the investigation or revealed whether anyone was disciplined. Quote, one source to Westhead. People who were interviewed did not receive a copy of an investigation report, and they weren't even told what, if anything, the complaint had led to. It's safe to say that the trust that was given because the investigation was independent was lost after that. It may be hard to trust yet another independent investigation, end quote. Durant declined to comment. Sources told TSN that they are open to sharing their perspective on working with the women's national team program, but aren't sure, based on their experiences with 2 previous investigators, whether they should trust Canada Soccer's newly retained independent investigator, Sonia Regenbogen, a lawyer with the Toronto law firm Matthews Dinsdale. One of the people who was interviewed during Canada Soccer's 2023 investigations told TSN they wanted the Federation to release them from a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement so they could share their story publicly. The Fed told TSN it would not agree to release the person from an NDA and wrote in an email that it encouraged anyone with information to contact Regenbogen, who has been hired to investigate the spying incident at the Paris Games and to also scrutinize historical ethical decision-making within the Federation's national team programs. Paula Senra writes an email to TSN trying to win over the hurdles, trying to win over the trusted prospective witnesses is just one of the hurdles Regenbogen will need to overcome in the coming weeks and months. Several lawyers who specialize in the practice told TSN in interviews last week. So why? Like I said, pivot. I feel like Ross. Pivot, and then why? I mean, I say this somewhat rhetorically. Why is John Herdman still employed by Toronto FC? But I cannot, for the life of me, Bart, look at a program that has been this blanked up. It's been a while to have a program short of something in college football that has been this blanked up, that is attached to Canada Soccer, and you now have Bev Priestman, who has a basically the equivalent of a 1-year show cause, and an assistant and an administrator that have 1-year show causes as well. What in the blank is going on with Canada Soccer?
Oh man. Well, again, I think this just has to call into question anything they've achieved over the past 5 years. I mean, I hate to say that like the players don't deserve any credit because they obviously had to go out there and execute game plans they were given.
Yeah.
But it's just very clear on both the men's and the women's side that the advantages they gained and the performances they put in were clearly achieved. I'm sorry. I mean, when you have this level of cheating to the point where you also say, well, everyone does it. And then everyone's like, not really. I think again, there's gaining advantages and then there's just flat out cheating. And especially a lot of this is, the chat and the conversation in the chat is going, the Twitch pitch.
Yeah.
Some of this is just flat out illegally obtained. And so we're not talking about, cheating from, we're not talking about like cheating and just a sporting merit type thing. I mean, there are some of these things that are just illegal actions.
It's not like banging garbage cans if you're a Houston Astro.
Right. It's not, McDonald's bags of money, if you will.
Right. Danny Sheridan and the bag man. Yeah.
This is these as we saw with this specific incident that kicked off all the investigations. This is illegal stuff. And that is, again, a very sad for this Canadian team that did achieve a lot, under Priestman, achieved a good bit before her. But it just calls into question anything they've achieved. It definitely calls into question everything the men's national team has achieved under Herdman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust that they did anything with any sort of moral turpitude. It's unfair to the players, but at the same time, the players got the unfair advantage. So
yeah, it's like, so Jarrett, this is not how this works. It's like you can't sit there and not penalize the current players, because that's not how this works. Yeah, you can't penalize. Well, yeah, you can. You kind of have to here. That's how this is supposed to play out. Is that, yeah, this happened now, and you have to penalize them now, regardless of what happened, and you get the 6-point penalty, and you still make it through the group and all that kind of stuff. But you can't, just for a triple negative that'll drive my mother crazy, you can't not penalize in the present tense because of actions that might have happened in the past. You have to let the process expose what has been there. And we're seeing that still with Canada's national soccer program, not just the team.
Yeah, it's the thing we talked about before, which is that even if the players hadn't ended up, allegedly the players saw drone footage and then used it to their advantage. So I don't want to hear anything about them, not knowing what's going on. But the fact of the matter is that even if they weren't running the spying, you can't just let sleeping dogs lie in those situations.
Yeah.
Because if you do, then you set a standard for anyone else that, if we just cheat, like if we cheat and we win some stuff, we get flags fly forever. We don't have to worry about anything. And we can just point to the players like, they don't deserve this punishment. And then everyone gets off scot-free. They know it's somebody, in the words of the great American classic film, National Treasure, somebody's got to go to jail, Ben.
Yes, absolutely true.
And Bart's now died.
Bart
they weren't even doing anything cool, like stealing the Declaration of Independence. They were just trying to get drone footage of practices.
They were getting drone footage of Honduras.
Yeah, of Honduras and New Zealand.
That noted CONCACAF powerhouse, Honduras.
Yeah, and the noted Olympic power, New Zealand. Leading
the country that Abby Erceg quit playing for because they had so many issues and then had to come back to once they had settled some of their issues, but not necessarily all of them.
Yes.